Welcome back. Over the past few days, ever since my previous self-analysis video, I have continued to play rapid games. The last time that you saw me do a game on chess.com, I had just broken past 1200. But as you can see here, my last several games only included 2 victories. Those are the 2 green dots up at the top. A bunch of games before that I lost, so I am back below 1200 once more. I haven't had a chance to analyze any of these games yet. That's what I intend to do in this video. And it might seem like I'm going a little bit rapid fire. I'm not going to cover the entirety of each game. I'm just going to look at the graph and try to pinpoint where I lost the game. For anybody who wants to look at the entire game of any of these games, I do usually, and in this case I will, put the links to those games in the description. So let's just take a look at the first game. In this game I opened with e4. My opponent played the Philidor defense, which begins with d6. I haven't had a lot of experience playing against that, but I think I did pretty well according to the graph. Out of the opening, I maintained at least even, if not a slight advantage. At one point, my opponent gave me a huge advantage, which I didn't notice, and in fact, my miss was so bad there that it gave them the advantage, which they kept from then on. So even though my mistakes were after that, it looks like my lone miss was that point right there that brought us back below even, so I'm going to start at that point. Here, after 15 moves, apparently I had just played in an accuracy, capturing whatever it was that was right there. And it brought us back to even, but we would only be even if my opponent would take this knight with one of these 2 pieces. It says the knight is slightly better, but instead they took with their queen, which was their 3rd best move, but it's bad enough to be a mistake. Now, the game review said that took me to plus 2.7, but the analysis board here says plus 1.1. That's still a pretty significant advantage if I play the right move here. It says my best move is to take this pawn. That's e5, right? Knight captures e5. Okay, well, not seeing that is what lost me the game. Apparently, there are actually 2 other moves, according to the move list there, suggested by Stockfish, that would have kept me with a mild advantage. One is capturing here, which I assume I considered at the point, and the other is capturing this pawn. I guess I can see knight capturing b6 because it directly threatens the queen. Actually, that's a fork of the queen and the rook. And it says at that point they would play queen to d8, which is backing up there. And then, yes, and then I would take the rook at that point. Okay, well, that I understand perfectly because that's a fork of 2 more valuable pieces than the knight. So not only would I pick up a pawn, so I would go up a pawn at that point. Once they move their queen out of danger, then I would get the rook. They would get my knight, but I would have gone up 1 pawn and an exchange. Okay, so I understand that. I'm not sure why I didn't see it during the game. From the move list, it looks like I only spent 8 seconds on this next move, and my next move was bishop to e3. Okay, well, given the circumstances, I do completely understand how that's a mistake. At least I'm pretty sure that I understand that. Because it looks like, well, it looks like for one thing, they could just take this pawn at that point, and that would be a free pawn. But then I could pick up this pawn with my bishop. But I can understand that it's a mistake because it is missing what I could have played to stay ahead. And like I said, I completely understand knight to b6. I'm not sure about the bishop capturing on f6. And it says if I did that, they would capture back with their bishop, and then I would take over. Well, I completely understand that. I actually suspect that if I took here and they took back, I would probably have taken there because obviously I didn't see knight to b6, so I probably would have captured here, which would have been check, forking their pieces, and then they would have had to take back with their pawn, which would have opened up their king. But in the end, that would have allowed them to take this pawn. So we would have had an even trade over here with me getting the slight advantage of the pawn structure being messed up. But then they would have taken an extra pawn out of the middle. So, but I am not, but it's the main move that I'm not understanding here. And it says that they would just play queen to e6 at that point. Okay, I do understand that this attacks their queen, but what I don't understand is why they would move the queen instead of just taking back with the pawn. So I'm going to follow that line out and try to figure it out. Okay, so if I take here, which it said was the best move, all of the 3 best moves listed by Stockfish are queen moves. Queen to e6, queen to e8, or queen to d8. None of them are taking with the pawn. Okay, and I think I understand why. If they took with the pawn, I assume I could take here on f6 with my knight, which would be check. They would have to take back or move the king, and then their queen's undefended. Because right now, that knight is what's defending the queen. And so once the pawn's out of the way, and once my knight's out of the way, then I would be able to win their queen for free. Okay, so I get that. I do understand that, but I don't... That's a double discovery right there. It requires me realizing that both of those pieces could move out of the way safely and at the same time remove the defender of the queen to feel like this was a safe capture. Now it says maybe queen to e8 is their best move, but it's pretty close with queen to e6. So let's say if they played here, then am I still supposed to take that? No. Now I'm supposed to take the bishop with this knight. Okay, because this knight is being attacked 3 times. Okay, so I would take the bishop with check. So I assume they would take back with the queen. It says that's their best move. Then I take here. Then I would take here. And they wouldn't take back with the queen. They would take back with the pawn. It says it's slightly better to take back with the pawn and mess up the pawn structure. Okay, well, I've got to know, why wouldn't they take back with the queen? Is it because I could fork? Is that what it is? If they take back with the queen, I would play knight to d7, which forks the rook and the queen. So at that point, they would take this free pawn, and I wouldn't take the rook yet. I would threaten their queen first. They would hide back here, and then I would take the rook. And then I assume they would take back with the other rook, and I've gone up in exchange. But I lost a pawn out of the deal. That's a really long and complex sequence that I had to see here at this point. And like I said, I do understand why my move was not ideal. And I probably, even now, looking at this board, I think I would play knight captures b6. That looks best to me, based on my level of play, because the definite best move, the knight capturing the pawn on e5, requires a lot of precision on the following turns on my part. And I don't know that I'm ready for that, but this I am ready for. I should have seen the fork. Let's go on to the next game. In the next game, it says that my opponent played almost perfectly, 93% accuracy over the course of 17 moves. I did not have any inaccuracies, mistakes, or misses, but I had one blunder. It was my last move. It looks like, and I'm guessing that their inaccuracy was their next to last move. So it looks like we both played perfectly until right here. My opponent played here, which was inaccurate. And that gave me a very slight advantage on this game review, but let's switch to the analysis tab, minus 0.27. But I had to play c5. It's the only move that maintains that advantage. Queen to b8 is second and takes us close to even. Queen to c7 is third and keeps us close to even. But to maintain the very slight advantage, I had to play c5. But instead, I got my bishop out because I was preparing to castle. Put my bishop here. Now, what did that allow? That's a blunder, gives them a +5 advantage, and that's because they can just take that pawn. Obviously, I'm not going to take back because my queen's in danger, and my queen has nowhere good to go, looks like. I mean, obviously, I can't come back here and here because the knight is covering those squares as well, and I can't move along this diagonal because their bishop is covering those squares as well. Why couldn't I just block with this pawn? Oh, it actually says capturing the knight is my best move here. Okay, well, I resigned here because it looked like if I just moved my queen out of the danger from the bishop, that they were going to take this pawn on g7, which would be a check, which would require me to move my king, so I would lose castling rights, and it would undefend that knight. So if they checked here, and let's say I moved up to get out of check, well, then I would be protecting the knight, but then they could check again, and if I captured it, they could come in with their other knight, and I would still be in check. And like I said, that's if I moved my queen to safety. But the Stockfish actually says it's best to take here. It would be almost as good to play queen to a5 or queen to b8 now. But I should have played queen to b8 before that, instead of what I did play. I mean, if I played c5, it says that their best move would be to drop the knight back. Because then taking here wouldn't be such a big deal, would it? Because then my queen wouldn't be in danger. The pawn would be in the way of the queen, and I could just take the knight and they would have lost it. Okay, I understand that. But playing what I did play, to me, this requires my opponent seeing an absolutely... I get the discovered check, the discovered attack thing. I understand that. I would have seen that because I've been looking for discovered attacks. Anytime your queen is on the line with the bishop, something like that, you move this piece out of the way. But to move that piece out of the way here, how long did my opponent spend on that? My opponent spent 8 seconds on that. I've switched over to the other game board to show the move times here on the move list. Is 7.6 seconds is how long they spent on them. But the move before, they had spent nearly 18 seconds setting it up. So maybe they knew what they were doing. Definitely not somebody who's, I don't think, playing at the 1100 level to see that. That seems like a really advanced tactic at that point. Not the discovered attack, but the knight looking like it's a knight sacrifice, instead of just putting the knight back here. It says their second best move is to put it there on f5, and their third best move is to put this knight over here, h5. Why wouldn't they have just moved it this way, which would simultaneously protect that pawn and attack here? But to attack in the middle, yeah, I'm not ready for that. And again, as I've said on many occasions in the past, I'm not going to win games in which my opponents don't make any mistakes. Even if I hadn't made this mistake, my opponent's playing perfectly. So I don't feel bad about that one. I do need to be more careful about lining up the queen on these diagonals, but Okay, this is the third game. In this one I played e4 and my opponent played the Caro-Kann defense. It looks like we both played relatively poorly here, 60% or worse, and we both played like 900s, according to the ratings estimator here. There were several misses and or blunders right there in a row in the middle. Looks like my opponent kept giving me an advantage, but then I kept giving it back. And the last time I gave it back, they kept the advantage. I'm just going to guess, because what usually happens is that was the same move that I missed every time. I'm going to guess that's what it was here. And it does look like that is what lost me the game, because after that it was -1, and then it just got worse from there. Probably on the analysis tab that's not going to be -1, but it looks like I missed several fantastic advantages in a row. Well, here on the move list, it lists 3 misses in a row, but not 4. But the chart up here said I had 4 misses. Where was my... There's only 3 misses listed. Come on, chess.com. You can do better. This says 4 misses. Let's look at the entire move list. No misses here. 1, 2, 3. Drag this slider down. There's an inaccuracy and a mistake, but there's no more misses. So I'm going to guess that b4 is a miss too. I'm just not sure why it's not showing up here. Okay, it looks like after move 9, when my opponent played knight to f5 here, that was a blunder. And on the analysis tab, I have a plus 1.3 advantage if I'll play g4. Okay, then it's probably going to be g4 that I missed on all the succeeding turns. My second best move is to get the other knight out here to d2. My third best move is to play bishop to g5, which would have kept us even. g5. Well, that seems like a computer move to me, or a grandmaster move. I'm still at the level where if you castle your king, you don't want to move the pawns in front of your king if you can help it. But I guess here it would have been a fork. I would have won a piece, right? That's a pawn fork. Okay, I understand that. If I play g4, it says they would drop this back, and then I would take the knight. They would take it with their bishop, and then I would play king to h2. Okay, to protect this pawn, because from there their bishop would be attacking my h-pawn on h3, and the g-pawn isn't there to protect it anymore, so I'd have to move my king over to h2 to protect it, and it says I'd be fine. I would have an advantage at that point. But I missed g5. Instead, I took a pawn here. Now, what they are supposed to play is capturing this knight. And I assume that's to avoid the pawn fork that I can play next turn if they don't capture the knight here. But instead, they took back that pawn. Okay, I was correct. It is g4 that I am supposed to play again because I still have the pawn fork. Okay, but I played b4 instead, and it is a miss. Here it's a miss. But over on this column here, okay, it says it's a miss when you highlight the move. But when you have a different move highlighted, b4 is not listed as a miss. That's confusing. Okay, but because they took that pawn, I have g4 again. I did not play it. I did not play any of my top 3 moves. I came after the dark squared bishop. Again, they are supposed to take here, and I'll take back, and then they'll save that bishop. But instead, they saved that bishop first, which gives me g4 again. It's not nearly the advantage that it was the first time. Now it's only plus 0.5 or so, but it is g4 that I missed again. I put my bishop on g4, and my opponent did not play one of their top moves here. They brought the knight back to block my threat on their queen, and I have g4 one more time, still have this pawn fork. But instead, I moved the knight out of the way of this bishop. They can either take this knight or take this bishop. They chose to take the bishop, and I played my best move to take back with the knight that was in danger here. Okay, well, backing up to the first one. Sorry, it was one before that, right here. Okay. I guess the lesson to take from this is that if you can win a piece, it's okay to move the pawns in front of your king. Because in this case, I am going to be guaranteed to win a piece. So when you learn all those chess rules or the chess guidelines, opening principles, that sort of thing, obviously all of them have exceptions. So in this case, the rule, not really the rule, but the guideline or the principle is to not move the pawns in front of your castled king. There are exceptions to that, and that's what I'm learning. What are the exceptions? And in this case, the exception is if you can win a piece. In this case, I was guaranteed to win a piece for a pawn. I don't know if that would have been enough, but Stockfish says I would have been doing very well if I played that. I would have been a piece ahead. I think probably one other reason that I didn't do it is because I still haven't developed these pieces yet. And I try not to go on any attacks while I still have pieces undeveloped. But that's what the engine says I should have done. Let's go on to the next game. Well, in this game, my opponent played e4 and I opened with the Caro-Kann defense. It looks like I gained a very slight advantage not too long after the opening and kept it until my opponent gave me a big one right here and I gave it back. But then right at the end, there was a couple of really big jumps. I gave my opponent a huge advantage, but they didn't see it. But then I did it again. So I guess that's where I should focus. I don't know if I should focus on this little point right here. You know what? Let's just check it out. Here, after 17 moves, we are very close to even. It is my opponent's turn, and they should play d4 at this moment, or rook b to c1. Not sure why it's important to be behind that pawn instead of that one. This is the semi-open file. Why don't you? I would have thought you would want the rook on the e file, but I don't understand how this works. I do understand that rooks belong on open files. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. Apparently, Stockfish thinks this is going to be a passed pawn or an open file before long. It wants either one of the rooks over there if you don't play d4. I'm not sure about that. But my opponent played b4, which is a blunder, gives me a minus 1.3 or so advantage, 1.4, but only if oh, they just gave me the pawn. That's why that was a mistake. Okay, and I didn't take it, did I? Oh, I could have taken it with my bishop over here. How nice that would have been had I taken that pawn. Was I moving too fast? Because what I played instead was bishop to e7. Why did I play that? I'm going to guess I played very quickly. It says I have 8:51 left. Oh, I played that in 2 seconds. Okay, that's my blunder here, is not taking enough time. After 17 moves, we both have used about a minute of our time. I can't do the exact math, but that sounds like we're spending very little time on each move. Just a few seconds. And here, as I just showed, I spent 2 seconds on this move. I have no idea why that's what I played. I don't know what that does. The only thing I can think of is that I was thinking about rerouting it around here or something, or maybe getting out of the way of the f pawn. But yeah, very clearly I should have taken that pawn. I get that one. Now let's go to the point later in the game where there were a couple of huge problems. Here, looks like my next move I gave my opponent a huge thing. I had a slight advantage, minus 0.4 at this point, and I needed several moves would have maintained that or maintained close to even. Rook to f7. Okay, well I get that. They're threatening mate. Looks like. Wait, no, they're not threatening mate. My queen's guarding that square. Okay. Well, rook to c6. I don't know why rook to f7 is my best move, because as I said, my queen is guarding that square, so they're not actually threatening mate just yet. Rook c to e8 also would have been fine. All of those would have kept us near even with me having a slight advantage. Oh, well, I see why what I played is a blunder, because, wait, I spent how much? It says I spent 30 seconds on that move. That's mate in one. Okay, well, that's why I should have played rook to f7, so that when I blocked my queen from seeing that pawn, that I would have something protecting it. Why in the... Wait, earlier my mistake was moving that bishop back, so I did eventually bring it around over here, but now I just brought it back after thinking for 30 seconds. Okay, well, time wasn't my problem here. Apparently, my brain suffered some sort of glitch, which we all do, but what in the world? My opponent didn't see it and played queen to f4 instead. It looked like I was attacking their queen, but they had mate. But instead they got out there. Okay, well, just a move or two later, it looks like I did it again. Now here, I did play one of my better moves. I took that pawn. Finally, that thing's been up there for a while, but I got it. And I have a slight advantage. My opponent played their best move, which was to slide itself in there. And again, they're aiming for mate, if I don't block it. So would this work? That's not listed among the best moves. Bishop to g5 is listed among the best moves. Interestingly enough. Oh, because that gets out of the way of the queen guarding that square. But this, okay, and that pawn's protected by my queen. Okay, so I get bishop to g5. That's my best move. Or rook to f7 again. Or bishop to d6, which would threaten their queen and allow my queen to guard g7. But I didn't play any of those. I hung mate in one, and they mated me in one. Okay, well, those were elementary blunders right there at the end, as was the one a little earlier in the game where I could have just taken the free pawn, but I didn't. Okay, well, I understand those. I apparently need to work on elementary level blunders, and I need to work on how fast I'm moving, how much time I take. Because as you saw, I took 2 seconds for that one move. Now here, where I took 30 seconds, whatever I did there, 30 seconds on that move, that's ridiculous, and I deserved to lose that game. Well, this is the next one. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling very warm right now, even though the air conditioner has been blowing. I think it's because I'm embarrassed. I'm feeling... You know how you get like a little overheated when you're really embarrassed about something? I think that's what just happened to me. I felt like a flush of, okay, in this game I played the Scandinavian defense because I had done pretty poorly with the Caro-Kann over a recent series of games. And it looks like I did okay out of the opening. According to this graph, in fact, I was up -2, around -3 at points. But then I messed up here. My opponent didn't quite see it, but then I messed up again. My opponent played like a 1250 and I played like an 1100, which looks like where my rating is headed. Let's just go to those final 2 blunders or the points right before them. All right here I'm up about -1. If I will play knight f to d7, okay, it took me a second to figure out what that does. Right now they have 2 pieces pointed at my e-pawn, and I only have 1 defender on it. Moving this knight back here would defend it. Or knight b to d7 would do the same thing. It would help defend my e-pawn. Likewise, rook to e8 would help defend the e-pawn. So this position is all about the e-pawn. I need to defend it, but instead I played that, which doesn't defend it. It just lets them take this pawn, and their best move is to take it with the queen, but not with the knight. Looks like from the move list they took it with the knight, so I continue to have an advantage here, and the reason that works is because I can play h6, according to this, or b4. To me, those moves are not in the same category at all, not in the same class, but to stockfish, I guess, computers can see so much more than we can. Ah, there the air conditioner's blowing again. Maybe it felt the heat coming off of me. But anyway, yeah, this looks like it's trying to break open their structure, but I think they would just push past it. But this here is a direct threat on the queen, so I understand h6, which is why I played it. And it says I'm up -1.8. Even if they play their best move, which is queen to g3, or their second best move, which is queen to f4, which is what they played. And now all I need to do is play knight to h5 and keep chasing that queen. Where's it going to go? Oh, it's going to go right over there and attack my knight. Well, then what would I do? Then I would take their knight, and then would they take mine? I don't know if they would take mine or not. It says that they probably would play f4 then. Well, I don't know what they would do, but yeah, okay, I attack their queen. Even if they attack my knight, I get their knight. Okay, well, that makes sense. I have other moves that aren't horrible, like queen to e7. Okay, I don't have to worry about this pawn because my knight's defending that pawn, so I can play queen to e7 for reasons I'm not entirely sure about. Don't know exactly what that would do. Or knight to a6. What would that do? Is that helping to prepare b5? Because again, if I play b5, they're just going to lock that up, and then this knight's over here doing nothing. I don't know. And plus right now the knight's defending that pawn, which would allow me to play queen to e7, which I don't know the point of. So I should have played this then, but instead I did that. You know what the problem with that is that it just hangs the knight, because that pawn was defending my knight. Well, I saw that as soon as it happened. Did they take my knight? They did take my knight. And there I resigned. That's an elementary blunder. Okay. Well, I'm making a lot more elementary blunders than I did. So if you're trying to learn a lesson from this video, if you've made it this far, one lesson that we've learned so far is that the more elementary blunders you make, the less you're going to win. Even at our level, you need to make fewer elementary blunders. And if you're going to blunder at all, make the complex ones that nobody understands. But the one good thing about this video so far is that I do understand most of these blunders. I don't always understand how to pick the best moves, the ones that Stockfish found, but I do understand why the move that I made was wrong, and I shouldn't have made that move. How long did I spend on that move, by the way? 9:03 to 8:45? I spent 18 seconds on that blunder, knowing that this knight is... Oh, that's why... Okay, now I know what queen to e7 does. It helps protect that knight in case I ever want to move this pawn. All right. Okay, well, I am getting something out of this. Unlike the last time I did this omnibus edition where I analyzed a bunch of games in one video, I didn't understand most of those, but this time I am. Here in this next game, it says my opponent played far better than I did with only 1 mistake and no other bad moves, whereas I had 3 mistakes and a miss. And as you can see from the graph, white gains a more and more solid advantage as the game goes on. My opponent's only mistake looks like it was right there in the middle. This one... We played e4, e5. I did not respond with the Caro-Kann defense because, again, I'm suffering a series of defeats with it, and as you saw, I lost with that Scandinavian, so I played e5 this time. They brought out that, which is the Petrov's defense Urusov Gambit, according to this opening book. I thought the Petrov was where we both had our knights here. Is this going to morph into that, but you play the bishop first? I don't know a lot of e4, e5 openings like I should, I guess, but that's what it says that... Oh no, here it calls it the bishop's opening. I just switched from one tab to the next and didn't change any moves, but now it's called the bishop's opening. Or did it become the Petrov's defense after I got the knight out? It does say that's my best move. And this calls it the bishop's opening Berlin defense. Let's go back over here. Petrov's defense, Urusov Gambit. And it says that's the last book move. Well, if that's the last book move, then they need to figure out on chess.com whether this is the Petrov's defense Urusov Gambit or whether this is the bishop's opening Berlin defense. I don't know. I'm not an openings expert. It might be both, but whatever, they should say that here. That's confusing and distracting. I'm trying to figure out why I lost, not figure out why chess.com doesn't know what the name of this opening is. Okay, let's see if it changes after the next move. It did. Now it's the Petrov's Defense Urusov Gambit. Okay, well, what am I supposed to play here? Am I supposed to take this pawn? I am supposed to take that pawn. I did not. I guess I thought if I took that pawn, then they would take mine. But it says that they wouldn't. It says if I took that pawn, they would get this knight over here, and then I would take that knight, and I would have a very slight advantage after they took back. Okay. Later in the game, my opponent messed up here and gave me an advantage if I will play f6. I did not want to play f6 because that opens up this diagonal to my king. This is another one of those cases where, like we had a couple of games ago, where I didn't want to move the pawns in front of my castled king. Here it's a case of me not wanting to move the pawn, the f-pawn, next to my king that hasn't had a chance to castle yet. But it says that's the only move that gives me an advantage. Knight to d7 would give my opponent back the advantage. That's my second best move, and the move that I played is a little behind that, bishop to there. I thought this was adding another layer of protection here to the middle because, well, they were attacking it twice and I only had it defended once. But that was the answer? f6. Really? And they wouldn't have taken here. What if they had taken here? I would have taken back, and then... Nope. Oh, that knight's pinned. I get it. This knight is pinned. That's why. Okay. Let's back up then. Not sure what they should have done. What should they have done? Should they have castled? No. Wow, I shouldn't look at my opponent's blunders because I understand that very little. Oh, I guess if they had castled, I would have taken the knight. But I could take the knight even if they did that. It says I wouldn't, but I don't know why. Okay. All right, well, let's say I had played f6. It's changing its mind, but knight to c3, which I guess attacks this knight. Bishop to g5. What? Or castle. You see what I'm saying, right? It's as if they played knight to c3, I would take it. I think that's true because my knight is currently under attack two different ways. So yeah, if they played knight to c3, which is their best move, I would take it. Then they would castle, and then I would take this, and I would have a slight lead. But their second best move, which is almost as good, is here. And my best move is not to take either one of those pieces. Wait, nope. Stockfish changed his mind. My best move is to take the bishop, but not the knight. I like how the game review thought that was an inaccuracy, but you saw Stockfish said that was their second best move and almost as good as this. But yeah, now my best move is to take here or bishop to e6. But bishop to e6 is what I played in the first place. Bishop to e6 is what I actually played, but that's bad because my opponent can castle, and they did. Okay, now I'm supposed to play knight to d7, but instead I attacked the bishop. I thought that was a good idea to get it to run away. It did not run away. My opponent played that, which is very brilliant. According to the game review, I am supposed to take it with my knight. I did, but that wasn't brilliant. Wait, it's just good? That says it's my best move. Well, it should be at least excellent. Anyway, that's my best move. They're supposed to take the other knight now, which they did. Am I supposed to take it back? Yes. And then they're supposed to take that. And now I'm just supposed to move my queen over and offer a queen trade, but they won't take it. They'll take that pawn. Or I could move my queen over to protect the pawn, and then they'll check me. Well, that's why I didn't want to move my queen, so I did that. That's a mistake. Do you know why that's a mistake? Because of this. That's a check and wins my knight. I felt the flush of embarrassment again. Fortunately, you can't feel that. You're not close enough. I don't think you can see me sweating, although I might be getting a little shiny on camera. Well, that got messed up really quick. I still don't understand the f6 thing, though. I do understand that last blunder there, but not the f6 thing. Let's go into the next game. The good news is I won this game. As I'm recording this, whatever day you see that, as I'm recording this game was just a couple of days ago. It says I did have 2 mistakes, but according to the graph, the mistakes came after I already had a huge lead and they just brought us back to near even, but they didn't. At no point did my opponent have a lead in this game. So I feel pretty good about that. Looks like my opponent played a pretty bad blunder right there and gave me a +4 advantage, and I took advantage of it with a great move at one point. So I don't feel a need to go through this game because I'm already exhausted from going through all the others. I don't know that I would learn from those mistakes or not, but I did win this one. That was quite a relief. Let's go on to the next one. Well, this one I haven't gone through yet, but I'm pretty proud of that 94.3. And this was the last rapid game I have played. This was last night. It says I had 1 inaccuracy. And the little message there says, "Smooth, you had the advantage from start to finish." Well, Smooth is not my middle name. But we did play the 3 knights opening here, and it doesn't look like my opponent had 1 blunder that gave it away. It looks like they just slowly gave the advantage away here. Maybe there was a blunder right near the end, but let's take it to this point. No, one before. Yeah, it says I played like a 1900. That's fantastic. Let's hope I keep playing that way. But it probably, and this often happens. It probably depended on the moves that my opponent made. I assume that if my opponent had made a different move, I would have responded maybe not as well. Okay, here my opponent had just played an inaccuracy, but we're very close to even. I played my best move, which was to take that pawn. It was not their best move to take back, but it wasn't horrible. And now I'm supposed to take that pawn, which was my plan, so I did. And I was thinking about maybe trying to get my queen in here or trying to get the rook in here, somehow continue harassing their queen, which is in a pretty awkward position. My opponent needs to put a rook on the e file, according to Stockfish. They need to play either rook F to e8 or rook A to e8. I assume to protect this pawn right here, their e pawn, which looks like it's hanging. Their next best move is queen to a6, which that doesn't protect that pawn, but it aims at this one. So if I do take that pawn, then they could take one back, I assume is the reason for queen to a6. I don't know. Well, it would also preemptively get it out of this position here. But instead they played rook F to d8. Well, that allows me to take the stranded e pawn. You notice another thing that this did? When I made this move, I noticed something about the position. I noticed that my queen and my bishop were on the same diagonal, and down at the end of that diagonal was a very juicy target. So I started thinking, I sure would like to get this c-pawn out of the way. So my opponent now is supposed to play rook to e8, but instead they took that pawn. Now all isn't lost here for my opponent. I have a plus about 2 advantage according to this analysis tab, but there's really no better move for me than to move the c-pawn out of the way. I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily hanging because they're not going to take it, right? I have a queen and a bishop defending it, but as I mentioned, these two pieces could, well, they could just defend each other, even if my opponent sees this possibility down here to get the c-pawn out of the way. So now it's a mate threat. They have to do something about that, like play f6. And so they didn't play f6, and I checkmated them, and that felt really nice. But as I said, as often with very high game evaluations, like if you get a 92% or 94%, usually that's because your opponent messed up and you took advantage of it. That's what happened here. I would like for that to keep happening, but I would also like to be able to do well even when my opponent doesn't hang mate in one. Like I was doing right before that, I thought I was doing pretty well, and they hadn't made huge blunders yet. That was their only blunder of the game, was not defending against the mate threat. Before that, they just had a minor mistake and some inaccuracies. So I felt pretty good about this, even without this last move, that I was apparently played almost perfectly. But as you saw, that was an aberration from a long string of losses. I am now at 1168 after this game. I'm going to try to do a couple of things that I've learned from this video. One is I'm going to try to take a little bit more time, especially in complex positions, if I have the time. And in those cases, I did. We saw 2 or 3 places here where I didn't spend enough time gauging the position and looking at the downsides of the move that I did make. Again, I might not be able to find those best moves that Stockfish was finding, but if I take a few more seconds, I should be able to find the downside of the move that I wanted to make, like the one where it quit defending the knight and they just took it. So if I can find a reason to not make that move, that's a reason to look for another move. And if I see that I have 8 minutes left, I can take 20, 30 seconds to find the next move. And the other thing, as my opponent just did here, hung mate in one, I hung mate in one a few games ago that we just saw in this very same video. And that was a case of me taking 30, I took 30 seconds and still hung mate in one. My opponent didn't see it the first time, but they saw it the second time. I blocked my queen from defending that square. So that takes us back to the very simple principle that all the really knowledgeable chess YouTubers are telling us all the time. On every move, before you make the move, you have to look, can my opponent check me? Can my opponent capture a piece after I make that move? So before you make the move, you have to imagine, and this is hard, it's hard for me, so I know it's hard for some of you if you're around my rating level. It's hard to not move the piece, but pretend that you did, and then look at it. Look at the board, imagining that you made that move, and then see what it looks like from there. That's something I need to work on. And I think maybe daily games maybe hurt my ability to do this, because in daily games, you can actually switch over and move the pieces. You're also allowed, as far as I know, to take a physical board and set it up and make different moves and examine different evaluations, as long as you don't use an engine. But seeing those actual moves on the board has maybe hurt my ability to see imagined moves on the board. Not all the time, because as I said way back here, when I took this pawn, just as I took the pawn, I realized that these two pieces were on that diagonal, so I imagined that piece moving and me being able to hit here. So I do have some ability to do it, but it's something I need to work on. So anyway, I think that's 3 things that I can work on. Right, well, I've got my work cut out for me. You probably do too, so I'll let you go. But I do appreciate you spending your time here, and I'll see you next time.